Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. Today's video is going to be my 5 eyeshadow palette review for November. Welcome to everybody watching today. This channel is all about eyeshadow palettes, essence and Catrice reviews, and getting the use out of my makeup. So today we're doing a double whammy. We're combining the eyeshadow palettes with usage because I've used every single shade in these 5 palettes that I will be reviewing for you today. So let me tell you what's featured. Cosmic Brushes Serenity, the Nearly Natural and Nocturnal palettes from Glaminatrix, and then I have these 2 palettes from Douglas, the Sunset Girl and the Eyes Full of Stars. In case you're new here, then it may be good to know that I have fair skin with a cool to neutral undertone, which greatly skews my makeup preferences, and because I have been buying, trying, and reviewing makeup for more than a decade, I kind of know what I like. So if you'd like to join the family and subscribe to the channel and join the Snow Angel Club, you're more than welcome. So yes, 5 eyeshadow palettes that I want to chat to you about today. Of course, as usual, I'm going to be inserting close-ups, swatches, and looks as I'm talking you through these palettes. I've already mentioned that I've used every single shade in these palettes before I sat down to film this video, and one of the looks I'm wearing on my eyes today is featuring one of these eyeshadow palettes. So I hope you really enjoyed it. Let's get to the first palette. So let's kick things off with what I would like to call the boring bits, because I think the other 3 palettes are a bit more exciting than these. Are these boring? Not by any means, but the 2 Douglas palettes that I got to try this month are definitely more sort of what we have seen a lot of other brands do. They're not that unique. So let's start off with the blue one, the Eyes Full of Stars, and this is the more neutral one of the 2. The blue background, though, kind of throws you off because the blue makes it look much more cool toned than it actually is. If I cover up these 2 shades, you can see that we get quite a lot of bronze tone. So this pulled a lot more warm toned on me than you might expect just looking at this in the pan. And we only get 2 mattes in here, so I didn't really get the mattes that I really want to make this a very workable thing. And say for these 2 shades, like these 4, it didn't matter where I put those on my eyes, but they all pretty much looked identical. So there isn't a lot of variation in shades here. There isn't a really good light to dark ratio. The 2 cooler tones are okay, but everything has like a weird level of shimmer and it kind of muddies together. Was I able to create a nice enough look, and do these shadows blend well? Yes. I didn't buy this myself, so I'm not entirely sure how expensive these are, but in my head, the Douglas name brand, Douglas is like our Sephora, you could say, it's a little bit more expensive than a regular drugstore brand, so more like that mid-level. So I'm pretty sure that something like this would retail for like, what, 15 euros easily, and I would feel that that's just not worth it. If this was 5, yes, but I'm pretty sure that that's not what this goes for. So yeah, we do get a nice enough mirror. It's got cardboard packaging with a magnetic closure. I mean, we've got a lot going on there, so it's got a lot of good things about it, but if I had purchased this with my own money, I would be quite disappointed with it. Surprisingly to me, the Sunset Girl was far more successful for me. And that's because I knew going into this that this would be quite warm toned, not just because of the packaging, but we get actual reddish tones in here, which can be tricky to pull off if you have fair skin like me. Even this mauve shade was incredibly warm. This is a straight up yellow, but I did like some of the shimmer options here because they're a bit more peachy, and especially this is like that peach pink gold. It reminded me a lot of Expensive Pink by MAC, if you're familiar with that shade, which is one of my favorite MAC shades that I still have in my MAC palette. So after all those years, it's still a shade that I kind of hold near and dear to my heart. And this matte was actually dark enough to really make it work. So for me, the Eyes Full of Stars just didn't really have a good matte crease shade and nothing really to deepen it up. Now granted, this also doesn't have a lot to deepen it up because the deepest shade we get is a shimmer, but it worked pretty well along the lower lash line. I just wish that instead of like this weird yellow shade, that this would have a really nice dark chocolate brown so that we really get a nice array and you can really deepen things up. That I would have preferred a lot better, but I felt that in here we got some better quality shimmers. We also get more mattes in here. We do get 3 mattes and 5 shimmers, or 4 mattes. This looks like a matte as well, so it's more of like an equal like a 50-50 split. And just like, it just has a couple of shimmer textures that I like better. So I felt that this was a bit easier to work with because of that, because I just got shades that I just knew like, okay, this would work in the crease, and it also worked like that. Whereas in the other palette, I felt, I don't know, it just felt too much like it wasn't really thought through. And with this, I felt that it went with the vibe of the palette. I really liked the look it gave me, but it was very orange toned heavy, and those are usually not my favorites if I don't have dark browns to sort of anchor it. It's one of the things I love about, like, one of my favorite warm tone palettes is the Analog Cutie by Nabla, and that has some really nice like reddish undertoned cooler browns that work really well on my complexion, and that give me the depth and definition to anchor the palette. Because with shades like this, like, I did put them like this in the crease, I believe, and this on the lower lash line, but because they are so red, the chances that it's going to give you like pink eye look are very, very like much there with this one, which I don't love. So that's why these aren't a winner for me. And like I said, I think price point wise, these are far too expensive for what I would personally like to pay for something like this. But if you did own these, or if you were interested in like Douglas products, then I think they are okay. But with this kind of quality, I think if you buy Catrice or Essence and you find the right ones in those lines, you would pay a third of what you pay for this, and you would get better quality makeup. So do with that what you wish. Next, I want to chat to you about a palette that was an unexpected favorite almost, and it's also the palette I'm wearing on my eyes today. This look was created with the Nocturnal palette by Glaminatrix. I already posted this look on my Instagram because I loved it so much, and then I was like, I want to recreate it for the video, and I also filmed a short. So if you want to see me do this, then stay tuned, because in the next couple of weeks I will be posting that. But the Glaminatrix Nocturnal palette was one that I critiqued quite heavily when I first got this in for the cheap feeling packaging. Glaminatrix is a Australian indie brand, and I believe this retails for like 50 euros. So to get like it just, the magnetic closure on this feels a bit cheap. It's got this foam that you can just like press down on. It just doesn't feel like very high quality packaging to me. And it just feels like the inlay is going to rip from the outer packaging within like months of using this if you were to use this every day. So that's why I was like, for how much this goes for, and then the packaging inside it, I was a bit underwhelmed. It looks a lot prettier if you just see this in pictures. But the reason why I bought it, of course, is because of the color story, and I wanted to also compare this to some other palettes that I feel have similar-ish colors. That video is still coming up. I did already film it, but it's going to be my next palette dupe video, and this is going to be in that battle. And I actually decided to sort of split the palette into fours. So I grouped like the blue, like these teals with the periwinkle and the peachy shade. I thought that contrasting the greens with the purple would be really pretty for a look. And then finally I did a neutral look with what I thought was going to be like a bronze shimmer, because that's what it looks like in the pan. And then also a matte black that I was like, oh, I don't love matte black. But this is a multi-chrome. It's got green to gold. I'm not sure if you can really see it here. But in real life, it's really like that green, gold, peach sort of multi-chrome, and I really loved it. This is like Constellation is what it's called. It's my favorite shade in the palette, and I really love these like murky mustardy yellows that it has, and this mustardy brown as well. It's really, really murky and muddy. It goes on like that right off the bat. And then I felt I want to put the black in the outer corner, which I normally don't do. I just use blacks as an eyeliner. I don't use a black for actual eyeshadow or deepening things up. But I thought that having that multi-chrome there, if it had a bit of a darker layer towards the outer edge, I could perhaps get the flip to be a bit more noticeable. And I definitely feel that that's the way this sort of comes together. It's really one of those looks that doesn't look great until you get the shimmer onto the lid. So it's definitely like a work in progress when you make this one. And I like the other looks I did as well. I didn't really feel like the undertones of the teals went with these necessarily, but I was able to make it work. I thought it looked nice enough, and these shimmers in here are pretty amazing, I have to say. We get 5 shimmers, everything else is matte, so I would have liked there to be at least one more shimmer, because we don't get a shimmer in this row. So I would have liked there to be an actual, like another shimmer, maybe exchange this one for something else. I really like that sort of like chartreusey green shade, but again, I felt that this green shimmer didn't really go with it. So that was another issue I had. The plums were really lovely. So I definitely think that I can still do putting the teals and the plums together. You can of course use this as well, just like this, and using the duos that you have in here. That peachy shimmer also has a bit more of a multi-chrome, like all of the shimmers in here have a little bit of that extra something to it that makes them a bit more unique. So the plum shimmer isn't just the plum shimmer, it has that pinky cranberry quality to it when the light hits it. And that's why I thought this was very pretty, very successful. These shimmers are very creamy, easy to work with. They apply pretty okay with a brush, which means you do have a bit of playtime blending those shimmers out. The mattes blend really easily too, but the shimmers do go on most intensely if you do use a little bit of finger action and you just dab them onto your lid. That's how I got them to look this intense today. And I really enjoyed this palette, mainly because of that like look I'm wearing today. That was like the game changer. I put that on and I was like, I haven't felt this good in my makeup in a while. So that tells you something. But I also tried my other Glaminatrix palette. This was launched over the summertime. The Nocturnal has been out for a while, but the Nearly Natural by Glaminatrix was one that the minute I saw this popping up on their Instagram, I was like, right, this is going to be my moment to try the brand. They had been on my wish list to try as an indie brand for some time. And when the Nocturnal released, I was intrigued, but because it kind of looked like other things I already own, I was like, that's not going to be unique to my collection, so I don't really need that one for how expensive this brand is and then getting it shipped over from Australia. I didn't feel that if I were to just buy one palette, it was going to be worth it. So I kind of put the Nocturnal on my wish list as like, you know, in the back of my head, like if this brand does something else and they have two palettes in stock that I like, then I might purchase from them. And that's exactly what happened when they released this in July. So I ordered this when the pre-order went live. It didn't ship until August, I believe. Did I already have this when I posted my eyeshadow palette collection video? I don't think it was in yet when I did that video at the end of August. So this got here like last week of August, maybe first week of September. So I had to wait 2 months for these palettes to arrive. And then I opened this up and I was like, oh, this looks very different in pictures that you see online and then when you see this in real life. I was mainly intrigued by what appears to be green tones here in the middle. It seems to have quite a lot of rosy tones as well. It skews quite cool toned over in this corner as well, with some more warmth in this corner. At least that's what it looked like in a lot of the pictures I saw also from the brand promotion on their Instagram page. Now, then I got it home and I was like, that's not gonna look very neutral on me. It's warm. And it does have undertones. I do like that. But there are essentially like this, and then possibly even that, where, you know, you just get 4 shimmer shades that are nearly identical. This is just a gold and that's more of a champagne, so I could have done with one of those. I didn't need both. The only shimmer that's more cool toned is a gray. We don't get a taupe shimmer. It was a pretty shimmer though. It was one of the better shimmers in this palette, because we'll get to the shimmers in a minute. And to be quite fair, once I started trying it, yes, I get the mattes I want. It's more shimmer heavy than matte heavy. And I, for instance, really like these. I like that darker, deeper brown. Like this is the kind of brown that I was missing in those Douglas palettes. So it goes deep enough, it goes light enough. So it's got a lot going for it in theory, on paper. Once I started playing around with this, and already when I swatched it on my skin tone, you'll see it in the picture as well, this just looked incredibly warm toned, save for like these 2 shades, and everything else was warm. These seem to have a green undertone in the palette. I don't know what happens to them, but they look like golds on me. Like they don't even have that green tone to them anymore once I apply them, I feel. And one thing that truly made me feel a little about this palette, especially for how expensive it is that I didn't really get the shimmers to work very well. So the shimmers in here are very different from the ones in the Nocturnal. So now I'm really happy that I actually got 2 of these palettes, so that I can like compare what the brand has to offer. The ones in the Nocturnal feel very creamy and like that cream to powder kind of super shock kind of texture. That's what they feel like. This feels dry and flaky, and there's a lot of glitter particles, and for instance this, and also over here, and I felt that I got the sparkle, but I got very little base color, especially when I tried applying it with the brush. So in my experience, these are the most, well, those are more creamy than these. These just feel a bit dry, but they're most similar to some of the Patrick Ta shimmers that I tried in the Major Dimension 2, where I also struggled picking them up with a brush. With a finger, those looked really pretty, but here again, the only way I could really get them to shine is if I wet them. And I don't love applying shimmers with a wet brush. For 2 reasons. If you make a mistake, you can very easily create heart pan, because if you first wet your brush and then go into your shadow, especially if you're using setting spray to wet your brush, that setting agent is going to go into your eyeshadow. So I always like to pick up the product with a brush and then spray it down with the setting spray to wet it, so that the eyeshadow is wet rather than the brush. So that's the first thing. But because these shades are so difficult to pick up with a brush, wetting your brush that way doesn't really work. So I'm not sure how long this is gonna last. Is it pretty? Can you do some really sort of glam neutral looks with this? For sure. I like some of the shades a lot. As I mentioned, like this I really like. I also really like these 2 mattes are really lovely. But we only get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mattes? 7 mattes, and everything else has a shimmer. And the shimmers is where this palette is just lacking for me. I want them to be high shine and impactful and easy to work with, blendable, but not a glittery chunky mess that falls down my face. I had really, like, I never struggle with fallout, you guys. I hardly ever have an issue with fallout, because I double prime and I tap off my brush and I take all the precautions. But this is one of the very few palettes I've tried in recent years where I had major fallout, especially those like really fine glittery particles. They started to break off my lid throughout the day, and I get some sparkle on the tops of my lids. And I did do one of these looks where I took off the eye makeup and then went on to do the other one, and I could barely take it off. So if you are a contact lens wearer, you may want to be very careful if this was a palette you were interested in, because there are definitely visible sparkles that are left on your skin when you remove these, and you really need to like go in with like a double cleanse for everything to be gone, which is something to look out for, because maybe if you got these particles in your eyes, it may not be 100% eye safe for people who have very sensitive eyes, or perhaps if you have contact lenses. So that's something to look out for. Do I regret purchasing this? No, I think it's good in terms of like comparison, because I now have a couple of palettes that are a bit newer to me. I bought one from Glossgots that I think is very similar to this. They're a Swedish indie brand, and they're far more affordable than they are, than Glaminatrix is. And I also have the Coco Sanka Cashmere palette, which is also giving me a similar vibe to this. So I have a couple of like EU indie brand alternatives that are more affordable than this, and I definitely want to put this in one of my like palette comparison videos in the future, so I don't regret buying it from that point of view. But if I had bought this just for myself and I wasn't planning on creating other content with it, I might have felt a bit disappointed, especially with how expensive it is, the fact that I had to pay for shipping and handling fees on top of that, and then just not having this be as perfect as I thought it was going to be was a little bit of a bummer. But yeah, the looks I did with this came out pretty. I was able to like do some really stunning things, but it definitely took more effort than the Nocturnal, so the brand also seems to be a little bit inconsistent, and that always has me a little bit worried. And then finally, the Cosmic Brushes Serenity palette. This is also the final palette I tried for today's video. And this, I wasn't sure I was gonna like. So when this first dropped, this caused a major sellout. The brand had totally underestimated how popular this was going to be, and they have been doing pre-orders ever since. So I got this on a pre-order in the summertime, I think August time. It arrived on my doorstep, and I saved it until now, and it's really nice and colorful. If you know anything about me, then you know I love my blues, purples, greens, teals. Those are like my favorite colorful shades to wear. And this palette has it all, with like a neon orange, mustardy brown, and like a gold. Everything else though is green, blue, purple leaning. And I had so much fun playing around with this. This is quite affordable. They're a UK-based indie brand. I believe this retails for 20, maybe 25 pounds. The shipping wasn't horrible either. It was pretty good. The shimmers in here are not that many. We only get 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we get like this, but it didn't really show up as a shimmer when I used it on the lids. And then this. So really we get 6, and everything else is matte. So for my taste, for this to be a perfect purple, blue, green palette, it's a bit limiting in terms of shimmer options. I wish there were more shimmers. But was I able to create 3 really stunning looks? Yes, for sure. So the first look I did was super boring. I was like, I just want to get those neutrals out of the way. So I think what I did was that I used the brown, the orange, this peachy shade, the gold, and the black for like a very basic look. I think I just used the black as a liner. This though, I felt didn't go with it very well because it looks like a white in the pan when the light doesn't hit it, but it actually has a green flip. And it makes me wonder, like, why was that? Like, if that had been more champagne or like one of those pink peach ones, I think it would have worked better in the palette overall. Because knowing now that this has like a minty green flip, which is very pretty, it's a stunning shade, I would only ever pair it with some of the greens. Ever again. I would not put it with the blues. I would not put it with the purples. Maybe, you know, if you use some of the lighter purples and then a mint green inner corner, maybe pretty. But it's not a shade I feel is universally flattering with all of the other shades that are in here. The orange, which was the shade that really threw me for a loop when I first saw this, I thought it was really pretty. It looked really stunning when I started like using it to blend out the darker brown here. It just added something really nice, and on me, it's not as orange, but it's more peachy pink. It really has something pink running through it that really shone through on my cool toned undertone. So that really came through, and I therefore felt it worked a lot better. This shimmer was really pretty. The black worked okay as well. So that was a very stunning look. And then, of course, we had to do something with these teals. Now, the thing I feel this palette is missing is a teal shimmer. So I went purples and teals in one look, and that was my favorite look that I did. I really thought that was a stunning look, and I again had to take that off to do the last look I did. But yeah, I really like the way this looks. These very light shades, if for instance you have experienced the Wisteria shade in the ABH Nouveau, that's another one of those like pastel-y lilac shades. And we get quite a few of these like pastel shades in this palette. So if that has you worried that these will show up, oh boy, do they show up. They blend. They're not super like powdery and poof into nothing. They work really well as blend shades, and I definitely use some of those like lighter shades to like blend out an outer V, and it worked really nicely. You can still see the shade there as well. So thought that was stunning. And then for the final look, I focused on like these greens, this one, that shimmer, and these 2 blues. This blue is stunning. It's such a good, like intense, not quite navy, not quite electric blue, but it's right in between. I do feel that it would have been nice if we got like another dark green or like something a bit darker rather than the matte black. Like if this had been a deeper navy, I would have liked it even better, because navy, like a deep blackened navy, can work really well with the purples, with the greens, and with the teals and the blues. So then you would have more options, I feel. So if this had been a navy, I would have liked it even better. But yeah, that look turned out really great as well. I tried to do a bit of a cut crease moment here, and I feel it works. But this shimmer, it was just a struggle to make them go on intense, because these, again, need your fingers to really go on well. And then it's just a bit of a faff to try and pat that along a very precise cut crease line. So that was the only gripe I really had in here in terms of like quality and how it worked. I wore that cut crease look to my gym class, sweating, dripping down my face. It was still intact by the end of the night. I wore it for nearly 12 hours straight. There was minimal creasing. This is good eyeshadow and it's quite affordable. So those were the 5 eyeshadow palettes that I tried for you in November. Stay tuned for more eyeshadow palette related content, because next week I will be updating you on the 5 palettes I went back to for the month of November. So I have been selecting some older palettes that I want to get some more use out of. And then I do a video similar to this where I also show you some swatches and looks and doing all that with these older palettes, and sort of ask myself the question, like, do I still find these worth it? And I kind of want to keep that train going at least until I do declutters, because I think it's a great way to determine, is something still, like, does something still deserve a place in my makeup collection? So that's definitely something that is part of the experiment there. And I have that palette dupes video coming to you with the Nocturnal palette that's already going to be in there. So yeah, I've got a lot more eyeshadow palette related content coming your way. So if you'd like to stay tuned for that, and then I hope to see you in my next video. Bye-bye!